Okay, I think we'll go ahead and start. First, I'd like to welcome anyone who's tuning in from outside of Harris County, because since the COVID breakdown and we've had to take our CLEs online, we've been inviting everybody across the state, lawyers across the state, to participate in all of our free CLEs, and we'll continue to do that throughout this crisis. And in the meantime, we've spawned the Texas Association of Defense Counsel. I'm sorry, Texas Democratic Lawyers Association. I'm thinking of something from my past. But this CLE today is really geared towards election workers in Harris County. That's people working as election judges, alternate judges, or election workers. That's not to say if you're not doing those things, you can still participate in the CLE and get a benefit out of it. But that's what the information we're providing today is really geared towards. I'd like to make a couple of announcements. We've got 2 upcoming CLEs in October. On October 8th at noon, we have an eviction law crisis CLE. And I think we have Jeremy Brown, JP, is going to participate in that, Judge Kovac, and we've also got some tenants advocates participating in that. And we also have the Representative Wally, who serves as the Harris County the Harris County Recovery Czar, will be participating in that as well. And then on October 29th, we have our Clarence Darrow celebration. In light of COVID concerns, we'll be doing it outside on the patio of the Zaza. There'll be a very small group of people there outside. The main event will be our live stream event, and we hope you can all tune in for that, and you'll get a free 3/4 of an hour CLE on ethics. And our very worthy recipient this year is Gary Bledsoe, the longtime director of the NAACP. All right, with that, I'd like to turn it over to Nicole Peterson, who's heading up the efforts in Harris County, the voter protection efforts in Harris County, and has put together a great panel of CLE presenters today to provide some important information. And we need as many people as we can to join her effort. If you haven't already, spread the word. This video, like all other videos, will be put up online on our Facebook page for later viewing if anybody couldn't make it today or wants to rewatch it. Nicole, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Stephen, for having us. I'm going to share my screen now, so bear with me. Okay. Okay, I hope it's working. All right, so our agenda today, as Stephen said, this is aimed at election workers, so judges and clerks. In particular, we have reached out to lawyers and law students, but really anybody is welcome to watch this presentation, and I hope that you all find something beneficial from it. Our agenda today, we will go through some areas of the election code that we thought would be particularly relevant to you and that you may find helpful. And then once we go through those, we will get to some common scenarios. So we have some prior election judges and clerks on our panel who will be talking about the ways that they would have handled certain scenarios in the polling location. And then after that, we will have a Q&A. Please put any of your questions in the chat. I'll be moderating that, and we'll try to get through as many as we can in the time left for the Q&A. Also, just to note, this training is supplemental to and not a replacement for the county clerk's training. So everyone who has signed up to be an election worker must take the county clerk's training. That will be online. They will provide it to you. That is mandatory. This is just a supplement to that. Okay, so just some basics, because some of you, I realize, have never worked in a polling location before, and you have not yet had the county clerk's training. So we're going to go through some very basic things, and then I'm going to hand this off. So election workers, in the polling location, you will have the presiding judge, right? That's the person who's in charge. In addition, you will have an alternate judge from the opposite party as the presiding judge, and then a number of clerks, which are the people who help process voters throughout the day. We at the Harris County Democratic Party have created a position that we are calling the election law clerk. This is for attorneys and law students who are taking this CLE so that they have a little bit of extra training in the election code and can be there to help support their presiding judge. This is not an official position. The county clerk's office will not know what you're talking about if you say that you are an election law clerk, but we think that this will be a great benefit to the presiding judge and will help us have a smoother election day and early vote period. So poll watchers, I'm sure all of you have seen in the news that the Republican Party is planning to have lots of poll watchers, and Trump even mentioned that in the debate. We on the Democratic side also have poll watchers, and we have for many years. In Texas, poll watchers only have certain abilities. So I'm not particularly concerned about the large number of Republican poll watchers we are expecting in the polls. First of all, a poll watcher is someone appointed by a candidate or political party to observe the polling location. They must be credentialed. We do not have unofficial poll watchers in Texas. Anyone who is a poll watcher must come to the presiding judge and present a certificate, which I will show you in 2 slides from now. So there's no need to worry about unofficial poll watchers because they are not allowed in the polling locations in Texas. Further, only 2 poll watchers from each candidate or political party is allowed in a polling location at any given time. Further, poll watchers are not allowed to talk to voters. All they can do is observe and raise any issues that they see with the presiding judge. And I'm going to show you the exact statute in the next slide so you can see that their powers are really quite limited. If they want to talk on their phone, they need to leave because they are not allowed to have any recording device out and they're not allowed to be disruptive. On election day only, so this does not apply to early vote, on election day, if a poll watcher leaves for more than a brief time to make a call or use the restroom, then they may not re-enter unless they have already been there for 5 hours. So there can't be just one poll watcher, for example, who's going to multiple sites and coming back, right? They have to stay for a full 5 hours if they want to leave for an extended amount of time and come back. For early vote, that is not a rule. They do not need to stay for that 5 hours. So this is the actual statute. You can see in the first part, particularly if you look at 33058B, right? A watcher may call the attention of an election officer to any occurrence that the watcher believes to be an irregularity. An officer may refer the watcher to the presiding officer, right? So that the watcher may only speak to the presiding judge. And in that case, the watcher may not discuss the occurrence further with the subordinate officer unless the presiding officer invites the discussion, okay? So the watcher, really all they can do is go to the presiding judge, raise their concerns with the presiding judge, and that's it. They can't talk to your clerks if you don't want them to, and they cannot talk to voters. This is the poll watcher certificate, and just an example of what it would look like. So any poll watcher who shows up at your polling location must have one of these certificates. Some things to look for. So the top needs to be filled in, right, with their name and who has appointed them, their party or candidate. The county chair or candidate must sign, right? So you need to look for a signature. And then you, with the poll watcher, will fill out this affidavit that is underneath that part, right? The bottom is in Spanish. You both do not need to be filled out. It can be one or the other. Okay, if you need support, we will have our team of voter protection attorneys. So everyone on this webinar today, the panelists, we are all part of a boiler room, and we have a few more attorneys as well who are part of that. We will be available throughout early voting and on election day. So if you have a question, if you need support, if something's going on and you need us to get in touch with the county clerk for you, you can call us. This is the number that you can use. It is HCDP's main number. So when you call, a receptionist will pick up and just tell them you want to talk to the voter protection attorneys, and they will forward you on to one of us. Okay, and then finally, just some brief comments about what protections will be in place. And the county clerk's office will go through this in much greater detail with you during your mandatory county clerk trainings. The judges and clerks will be required to wear masks, and those masks will be provided by the county clerk's office. I also understand there will be plexiglass between the workers and the voter. For voters, the lines will be distanced so that everyone needs to be at least 6 feet from the person in front of them. And the e-slates, which are the voting booths, will also be distanced 6 feet apart. Voters will be offered a mask. If they refuse to wear a mask, you can encourage them to use curbside voting. If they refuse to do that, there will be one e-slate designated for people refusing to wear masks, and they must use that e-slate. All voters will be offered hand sanitizer and a finger cot, which is like a glove just for one finger, and they will be given a sanitizing wipe. So as I said, there will be more information on all of that at the county clerk's training. This is what they have provided to us and told us that they will be providing to the voters and the workers. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michael.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Herta, and I'm just here. The voter ID laws that we have in Texas, we kind of all know about them. They've been in place now for a handful of years, but I'm going to just give a brief overview that might be review for most of you, but with a focus on what's going to be important this year. So if we could go to the next slide. So there are basically three general options for an acceptable ID that a voter can present and then be accepted as a voter and go and vote on a regular ballot. There's the photo identification that that Texas mandates, and we hope everyone has, and that's what I will spend the most time talking about. But there are also other types of identification that a voter can present, and combined with that, signing a reasonable impediment exception to their ability to get a photo ID. I'll talk about that a little bit. And then finally, though we won't get into this much, there's also a disability exemption for voters with disabilities. That will be on their voter registration certificate that they get from the state. Again, we're not going to really talk about that third option, but as you are working the polls, just know that it will be something that a voter might show up and show you their registration certificate, and it has on that certificate an exemption because of their disability. All three of these options are mentioned in Election Code section 63001, and really almost everything in this section of the CLE is from chapter 63 of the Election Code, which details really everything that needs to be done to accept a voter and process a voter. All right, next slide. So we have a decent list of acceptable photo identifications for that first option in Texas. There's a group of Texas IDs and then a group of federal IDs that are acceptable. The group of Texas IDs, there's the driver's license, there's a specific election ID certificate, there's a Texas personal ID card, and then there is also a concealed handgun license that is acceptable. There's also a number of federal IDs that are acceptable as well. A US military ID card with a photograph. Note that it does not matter what type of military ID card from any of the armed forces, it's acceptable. I don't know if we have any Space Force members in Houston, but presumably if we do and they have a Space Force ID, that would be acceptable. The statute does not specify which military service or what type of military ID card. Also, there's a US citizenship certificate with a photograph, and then a US passport, either the passport book or a passport card. Both are acceptable. Note that there are some common photo IDs that are not on this list. For example, student IDs is not on this list. And so to be an acceptable photo ID, it has to be on this list. So then if we go to the next slide, we'll start talking about what matters on these IDs. And it's really quite simple. The name matters, and we'll talk about the details of why that matters. The expiration date might matter depending on the age of the voter, and then nothing else matters. And I want to emphasize that nothing else really matters for a little bit. So if we go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about why. Say James Harden shows up to your polling booth and he presents his unexpired passport to vote, and his unexpired passport has his name, James Harden, on it. On the voting rolls, you look him up, his name is James Harden. They're exactly the same. Nothing else matters on his passport. you accept him to vote immediately. And so let's talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. And so that's even the case if his picture on his ID is his picture from when he played for Arizona State. This picture right here, without the beard, barely recognizable to any of us at Houston. It does not matter that his photo looks like completely different from him. That's also the case. A lot of voters this year are going to be wearing masks. If you can't see their face because they're wearing a mask, but their name matches and it's an unexpired acceptable photo ID, you accept them to vote. Their address also does not matter. So again, if James Harden's passport lists his Tempe, Arizona address from when he played in college, despite him voting in Houston, you still accept him to vote. Does not matter if the passports match. There is a provision in the election code for asking if voters still have the same address, but that's just, you believe them if they say yes. And it's asking if they still have the same address as they are registered to vote on. And so I just wanted to note that real quickly there. But again, does not matter if the addresses don't match. If the name matches and it's unexpired, you accept them to vote. Now, to talk a little bit more about those, yes, next slide is fine. For the expiration rules, as I said, it matters depending on the voter's age. If the voter is 70 years old or older, it does not matter when the ID expired or if it's unexpired. Really, they could just vote no matter expiration. If the voter is under 70 years old, then the ID must have expired no more than 4 years before being presented at the polling place. So, 3 years and 360 days expired, that's acceptable. But if it's more than 4 years, then we have to go to the other options. All right, next slide, we'll talk about the names. The name requirement is substantial similarity. And this is a very broad rule. The statute really just says substantially similar on it. So don't fret over minor differences. There are all sorts of different types of little differences that you can see and then accept as the voter. So if Anise Parker shows up as a different spelling in her name, also different variations of the same name, Beto for Robert, Enrique for Henry, a middle name is missing, or married, someone had married and their name changed. Those are all under Texas law substantially similar names. Now, if they do have a different but substantially similar name, then the voter is going to have to sign an affidavit stating that they are the same person as the name on the voter rolls. In Harris County, that's really just a simple initial. It's very simple. But again, you believe them. You don't have to ask them anything. I will note real quick that Texas, the administrative code put out by the Secretary of State's office does say that you could, if you're unsure, for example, if you aren't 100% sure, you didn't know Enrique was a variation of Henry, you could look at the other information on the ID to check. And if Henry B. Gonzalez shows up, but his name on the ID is Enrique B. Gonzalez and his address is the same, his birth date is the same, you could assume then that they are substantially similar and accept that person for voting. Ultimately, though, it's the election judge's call. If you're just a clerk and you're still having trouble deciding whether to accept the voter, call the election judge. And in the very end, err on the side of the voter. Texas has had Texas jurisprudence since the 1880s has stated that statute should be liberally construed in favor of a citizen's right of exercising the right of suffrage. That jurisprudence is still on the books today. In fact, just this year, the Texas Supreme Court cited a similar version of that jurisprudence in another case about different parties' voters. So we're on the side of the voter. All right, next slide. Now, of course, it's possible someone does not have that photo ID are that, their name is wildly different. But if they do not have an acceptable photo ID, there are alternate IDs acceptable with a reasonable impediment exception. And those acceptable IDs are first, any government document with the name of the address and voter. This is very broad and includes voter registration certificates, really any government ID that has the name and address. There's a copy of the current utility bill is acceptable, a bank statement, a government check, a paycheck, or a birth certificate, including certified copies, or even any other document that confirms birth, establishes the person's identity, and is admissible in court. And, as lawyers, we know that is still pretty broad. And so really the only other thing that they would have to do is sign an affidavit saying that they had checking a reasonable impediment that they could not get their photo ID, or that had an impediment towards getting that ID. As a note, as the Secretary of State has advised, and from other sources as well, poll workers may not question the reasonableness of that impediment that a voter signs. So for example, one of the possible reasonable impediments is lack of transportation. If you see someone in a biker jacket that looks like they probably ride a motorcycle a lot, and they check that they have a reasonable impediment for lack of transportation, you can't question that. You have to accept that and their alternate ID and just move forward. And so that's basically, that's the basics of our voter IDs in Texas. And again, that third option is the disability exception. And then from that, let's move forward.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tamika Harris, and I'm going to be discussing voting with a disability. It is a little more complicated than one would assume. It's not always obvious. And as the picture shows here, that's how difficult it can be for a person with disabilities to vote. So your job as the presiding judge or the alternate judge as one of the clerks is to spot these issues and handle them with diplomacy, with the intent of making it as easy as possible for the person to vote. Next slide, please. So when does a voter require assistance? Now you have a few codes, including the United States Code, that says when a voter has a physical disability that renders the voter unable to write or see, or is unable to read the language in which the ballot is written, or needs an interpreter to communicate. Those are your major ones. Obviously, you will not be able to tell that someone is not able to read or write in the language in which the ballot is presented to them, or they have a physical disability that is not visible to the eye, or they would need an interpreter in any one of the various languages. And next slide, please. So in this picture, on this slide, how many people are in this photo are disabled? So is it 2? Is it 4? Or is it all of them? The answer is all of them, although it's not obvious. As you see, the lady in the middle has a sign, disabled in here, but nothing from her outward appearance would alert you to that fact. So if she arrives at the polling location and says, I require assistance, that's as far as the inquiry goes. You do not ask, say, well, you look fine to me. It doesn't appear that you need any assistance. The only question that you may ask is, what type of assistance do you require? Next slide, please. So how does any person with a disability ask for assistance? They simply ask for it. I require assistance. Do they have to identify what their disability is? They do not. Do they have to prove that they have a disability? No. And do they have to appear to you to be disabled? No. They merely have to ask, and you ask no further questions. So at this point, if the person says, I require assistance, you will want to point them to the DAO unit, the disabled unit. Next slide, please. And actually, it's going to be the next couple of slides here. So what's going to, at this point, the person can bring their own assistant, even if that person is an 8-year-old child. That's totally up to the voter. The election clerks may assist the voter. The only person who cannot do that would be a poll watcher or the voter's employer or union. Next slide, please. And so here is how do you get get the assistant to the voting machine. The voter simply tells the clerk at the qualifying table that that person whom they brought with them is her assistant. That assistant must then take an oath and they must sign on the registration. And that oath is basically stating that they will only vote the ballot as directed by the voter, and they will not influence in any way the voter's decision to vote. Next slide, please. So here is your disabled access unit, and I apologize to everyone out there who is over 40. I diligently searched for a photograph with someone who was not elderly using the disabled unit access and was unsuccessful. So the Dow unit has sound. It can read the ballot in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese. There are headphones, and in this picture, they're not visible, but there are tactile buttons that can be used for people that have mobility issues to help them move the ballot along. So that is how that works. And they're also, they can either stand or they can sit down. So at your polling location, make sure that you have at least 2 chairs next to that disabled access unit, sitting to the side. That way, if the person is in a mobility device, they can simply roll up to the Dow unit and use that. If that type of assistance is insufficient or not enough, then you will then have other options. Next slide, please. So what happens when the voter cannot get out of the car? You can vote the person curbside. Next slide, please. So here you have this where if you have a sign, and this has been attempted where the person can call from outside the polling location. They would be calling the county clerk's office, and then the county clerk's office would call the election judge to let them know that someone was waiting outside. That doesn't always work as well. So what I would suggest that you do is designate one of your clerks to go outside the polling location and to check and see if there's anyone waiting in a vehicle that needs to vote. And that is, and that way you want to do that just about hourly to make sure that no one's being missed, in case the call doesn't come through to you or the polling location is so busy that you're unable to get to that. So that should just be designate one person, one clerk. That's whose responsibility is to go and check. Now, next slide, please. Once the person is outside, obviously they cannot come inside. They may send someone into the polling location with their ID, and that person should go to the qualifying table to have that person, the voter outside in the vehicle, qualify for voting. At that point, then a clerk will go to the disabled access unit, which is removable from the e-slate, which is the voting booth, and they will have a ballot ready, and then remove the e-slate as you see here in the car, and take that e-slate out to the voter in the car and place it any which way you can so that the voter, can actually manipulate the ballot herself and then cast the ballot. Once that is done, then the clerk takes the e-slate back to the polling location and inserts it back into the e-slate booth. That's the very basics. The one thing that I want to emphasize is that no matter whom the voter brings with them, you are not to question that person's ability to assist them or not assist them. That is that voter's absolute right to decide who assists them. It's not the clerk's or the election judge's call to say, well, I don't think you need this person, or that a clerk would be better. Obviously, if you have a clerk there and they request the assistance from a clerk, that is certainly permissible as well. And that is all that I have for voting with a disability. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Catherine Franco. I will be talking to you about drive-through voting. Really quick, just because it's a perfect segue from what Tamika was just talking about, but when they say anyone can assist, they really mean anyone that the voter wants can assist. And I'll give you a quick example. When I was in 2014, I was a poll watcher for the Democratic Party, and a voter came in to vote who didn't speak English very well. She spoke Spanish, and she told the judge she wanted me to assist her, a poll watcher, and the judge had to let her because that was her choice. And so that might happen on the other side too, but something that doesn't happen frequently. Okay, I will now talk to you about drive-through voting, which is another great segue from what Tamika was just talking about. You may have heard that this year there is a new type of polling location which will provide drive-through voting, and there's been some confusion between curbside voting and drive-through voting, which is why we wanted to make this clear. So the purpose of drive-through voting was created in response to COVID-19 as a safer, socially distant alternative to walk-in voters. Harris County is the first jurisdiction in Texas to create this new method of voting at a scale that allows all registered voters to cast their ballot this way. There will be 10 locations across the county, and anyone can vote. So some of the differences between curbside, which Tamika just talked about, and drive-through is that with regard to eligibility, curbside is open to any voter with disabilities, although you are not allowed to question their disability. On the other side, any eligible voter can use a drive-through voting location. Now, when it comes to locations, all polling locations provide curbside voting, but drive-through is provided at 10 polling sites across the county. Next slide. And so Tamika just talked about, with curbside, you drive up, you either call a number, or as some places will have buttons that you can use to call someone out to assist you. The difference in curbside is, drive-through is, for drive-through, the way it works is you will drive up to the location. There will be a nice little sign, and a greeter will offer you hand sanitizer and a face mask. Then they'll direct you to a drive-in parking spot. It looks like a Sonic, and you'll be instructed to turn off your engine and all electronics. You'll then be qualified to vote by showing your photo ID, and then the DAO that Tamika just spoke about will be handed to you through your vehicle window. At that point, you will be able to vote on your ballot in your car. If there are multiple voters in your car, each one can vote, so you can have multiple people in your car. And the way that works is you take turns, and while each person is voting, every other person in the vehicle should remain silent. So that means that the driver, for example, will be processed, registered, given their DAO, their ballot will be accepted, and then the process starts again with the next passenger. Once everyone has voted and the ballots are accepted by the DAO, you'll be handed your I voted sticker and sent on your way. It's a pretty quick process. It looks a little different than curbside, and there will be, I think, roughly 400 to 500 parking spots across the county for that. And then you'll be sent on your way. Let's see, next slide. Oh yeah, so here's a video that kind of shows you what it looks like. Okay, thanks. I guess, yeah, I'm back on. I just saw a question come in about the hours for drive-through voting, and they are open all through early vote and election day. They are not going to be one of the 24-hour locations, but they will be open the regular hours, the same as most other polling locations. Okay, so provisional ballots are tricky. It's difficult to talk about them without everyone having gone through training yet. So I will just start off by saying that everything I'm telling you here, I refresh my memory from the materials that you will receive from the handbook for election judges and clerks, as well as the Harris County election reference manual. So we can get into it a little bit. Nicole, can you give me the next slide, please? So provisional ballots. If a voter can vote normally, that is a non-provisional ballot, they should do so. Provisional ballots are better than nothing, but I say they are rarely counted, although I think this might be a little different year because of the many issues that are different this year. But anyway, our goal is always to have a voter fill in a regular ballot first, and provisional ballots are kind of a last step. In most cases, as I'll just go through, a voter that files a provisional ballot must go and cure their ballots within 6 days of the election. That's often difficult to get a voter to do. Once they've voted, they don't want to deal with that again. So I'll talk about some of the various reasons that you might have a voter file a provisional ballot. Next slide. Okay, so I listed every reason that we might have a provisional ballot, although some of these don't happen very frequently. Some of them don't even really matter for Harris County. Like there's one of the reasons we used to have to file a provisional ballot was if you showed up to the wrong precinct. We don't have that problem anymore in Harris County because you can vote at any polling location within the county. Okay, but some of the there are a few issues that come up quite frequently, and I'd like to talk about what to do and how to handle the provisional ballot and how to make sure that this is the actual situation and try to find a way to help this voter file a normal ballot before going to the provisional ballot stage. Okay, so one of the reasons that you file a provisional ballot is if a person doesn't have an acceptable form of ID, but they can reasonably obtain one. So as we spoke about earlier, if a person doesn't have a form of ID and they say that they cannot reasonably go get an ID, they can file the RID form, the reasonable impediment. However, if they don't have a reasonable impediment and they tell you they don't have a reasonable impediment, they can't file the form. And that is one reason that they might have an ID. This also happens when someone comes to vote but forgets their ID. That's another, so they have an ID, but they don't have it with them. So they don't have an impediment to get an ID because they have one, they just don't have it with them. So a provisional ballot is one way to cure this issue. However, what is preferable is to have the voter go retrieve their ID and then come back and vote. Because if they vote a provisional ballot here, then they will have to cure their vote within 6 days, which requires them to go downtown, show their, I think it's still downtown, but they have to go to the main office, show their ID, and go through a whole rigmarole of curing their ballot. So that's one situation to look out for. Let's see, others include, let me see, yeah, actually, let's go to the next slide. Another situation that comes up is if a voter comes to you, you can't find them, the names aren't an exact match, or there's something strange going on. You're having trouble finding the voter. They have an ID, but you can't find them in the system for some reason. they can file a provisional ballot. But before they do that, I highly recommend putting a call into voter registration and or calling the county clerk's office. I typically call both to make sure I can't find a voter first. They can help you figure out if that voter is registered. They're better at searching to see if there might be a typographical error somewhere that you're not catching, that type of thing. And so before putting the voter through the provisional ballot process, do make sure that you ensure that that voter is not actually that you can actually not find the voter in the polls, and reach out to us, reach out to the clerk's office, to the voter registrar's office before you make that determination. Now there is one situation that is important to remember, that if a voter comes to you, they say, I know I'm registered, and you cannot find them, and the clerk can't find them, the registrar can't find them, you need to ask if they registered to vote through DPS. Often what will happen is when you renew your driver's license, you can fill out the forms to register to vote. Sometimes there's for reasons that I won't get into, but I'm sure you can figure out, those applications don't always make it. And there is a process in place to where you need to mark their provisional ballot DPS, so that on the back end, when this goes to ballot board for review, those voters can be identified and they'll have a better shot of figuring out what the issue is. Another one that is big that will come up this year is ballot by mail. So if you apply for a ballot by mail, you can, and decide later that you don't want to vote by mail, you can vote at the polls, but you have to cancel that ballot by mail. So this is not if you've applied, excuse me, this is if you have not, so you have applied to vote by mail, but you did not vote by mail. You have to bring in that ballot, have it canceled by the election judge in order to be able to vote. If they do not bring you that ballot, then they will need to file a provisional ballot. And there will be a form that you have to fill out for them as well. On the operational side, because provisional ballots will likely be a big deal this year, I recommend when you set up your polling location, have a small table set to the side out of the way where a voter can sit and fill out the forms that they need to fill out for provisional ballots, which is a short form for the envelope that it goes in, just explaining the situation. And that really helps move things along in the county clerk's office. I mean, in the at the polling location. Sorry, I'm trying to read your questions at the same time. Okay, I think that might be all for me, Nicole.
I just wanted to add one thing to that, which is that during early voting for mail-in ballots, it's a little bit different. You do not have to have your mail-in ballot and surrender it. You can just cancel and vote normally. On election day, you must have the actual ballot to be able to vote on a normal, to vote normally instead of provisionally, right?
Well, thank you, Nicole. I forgot that we had both sets of judges and clerks here.
Good morning. I'm Liz Hanks. I'm going to be talking to you about firearms at the polls. Usually in most elections, this is a pretty easy topic, and I'll still breeze through it pretty quickly because the law on it hasn't changed, but it might be more of an issue this year than in years past. So in general, bringing a firearm to a polling place, the premises of a polling place, is a felony. So in general, you should not be seeing any guns or firearms and certain other types of weapons at the polling place or within the 100 feet around the polling place. Actually, can we go to the next slide? That's great. So here you can read exactly what is not allowed. Firearm, certain types of knives, there's other lists of prohibited weapons, and they cannot be on the premises of a polling place. during early voting or on election day, okay? So that's pretty clear, except there are 2 exceptions. So let's see those on the next slide. First of all, peace officers, which is pretty much any type of police officer, whether they are on or off duty, can have their firearm with them, and they can bring it to the polling place. The next exception is, next slide, for presiding election judges. If a presiding election judge already is licensed to carry a handgun under Chapter 411 of the Texas Government Code, and while they are performing their duties as a presiding election judge, they are allowed to have their firearm with them, unless they are at a polling place, which is a public school. The law is kind of confused, in my opinion, on this, but the recommendation is that a presiding judge who wants to carry at a public school should conceal carry and not open carry. And if you are going to be a presiding election judge on private property, you will need to get written permission from the property owner beforehand to be able to carry your weapon on the private property polling place. And if you are a property owner whose property is going to be used as a polling location this year, and you're concerned about firearms being allowed on your property, you have an option available to you of posting this form AW-7-9A, which is just an additional notice prohibiting handguns at the polling place, and that would preclude even presiding election judges from being allowed to carry on your premises. But you'll need to post it very specifically in that form, and you'll need to post it in all required languages. So if you want help with that, or you have friends who own property, we could help them guide them through that process. And the typical signage prohibiting open and concealed carry on private premises under Penal Code 30.06 and 30.07 should be enough, if you already have that signage, to preclude carrying on your private property. But if you wanted to just be doubly safe, that's what the that additional form would be for. I've included some of the election advisories and the Attorney General opinion upon which that's based, if you want to check them out more carefully. But that's the general caveat. Okay, next slide. So, okay, in years past, I would never have even presented on this topic, but this year maybe it will be an issue. Like I said, it's a felony to bring a firearm to a polling place, except for with a few of those small exceptions. And it is also illegal in Texas for groups of people to organize as private militias without permission from the state. So that means even if they're outside of the 100-foot premises of a polling place boundary, if you are seeing behavior that makes you think that it's an organized group meant to intimidate, basically what we would ask for you to do is write down whatever you're seeing. Write down what they're wearing, write down if they're carrying guns, write down what they're saying. Don't just say they're intimidating, write down exactly what has been said. If they're kind of behaving in a way that looks tactical or coordinated, or if they have a leader who is giving them all instructions, that would all be evidence that we could use to argue that it's an unlawful militia. And I would point you to this really excellent resource. Once I'm done, I'll throw it up in the chat, the link. But Georgetown Law Institute, in coordination with King and Spalding and Jones Day, they created this excellent resource for all 50 states of what constitutes an unlawful militia. So, it's a really great resource if you want to share it around, if you have friends in other states who are doing poll working and are curious about this issue. But that's pretty much it. Hopefully this will not be an issue. And if you have any concerns at all, you can always call us and we'll help you figure it out. The main thing though is don't call the police just because you see a gun at a polling place, unless it's an emergency situation. But we would love to de-escalate those types of situations without resulting to a 911 phone call first. And that's it. Thank you guys.
Okay, so turning my sound back on, turning the video back on there. Okay, so I am going to talk to you guys about activities outside the polls. So you're going to get a deep dive on all the things you need to know about things inside the polls and a little bit about some electioneering stuff at the county election training. So I'm going to briefly run through some of the stuff that I know you're going to talk about and just kind of hit highlights and give a little more detail about some things that they might not cover in detail at the county training. So let's get started. Next slide, please. All right, so first let's cover the authority of the presiding judge to preserve order. As the presiding judge of a polling location, you have a responsibility and a duty to preserve order and prevent breaches of the peace and violations of the election code inside the polling place and in the area outside the polling place within which electioneering and loitering are prohibited. So we're going to talk about that. That's 100 feet from the entrance to the polling place. As a presiding judge, you have the power of a district judge to enforce order and preserve the peace, and that includes the power to issue an arrest warrant. In appointing your duties, you may, if you feel it necessary, appoint one or more persons to act as special peace officers for the polling place. A special peace officer can't enforce any provision that you don't have the authority to enforce, such as things outside the electioneering distance marker. And then there are some requirements to be appointed a special peace officer. Point of this slide is to emphasize to those of you who are presiding judges that you have a lot of authority at your polling place on election day to use your best judgment and your discretion to do what you need to do to make sure that the election is proceeding smoothly. Next slide, please. So electioneering and loitering near polling place prohibited. Pretty much everybody probably knows that you cannot electioneer within 100 feet of the outside door of a polling place. So let's talk about what electioneering and loitering specifically mean. Next slide, please. So electioneering is anything that involves expressing preference for or against any candidate, measure, or political party on the ballot. So that's campaign signs, buttons, t-shirts, other apparel, flyers, push cards, that sort of thing. Loitering is the criminal offense of remaining in a certain place for no apparent reason. And that includes any kind of law enforcement officer who is not at the location to vote or at the request of the election judge in response to a breach of the peace, like we just talked about, or has not been appointed by the presiding judge as a special peace officer. So we'll talk a little bit more about this later. Cops just hanging around for no legitimate reason is not permissible. Exit polling is permissible. We get a lot of calls about this every election. Exit polling is permissible outside the polling place, but inside the distance marker, because it doesn't meet the definition of either electioneering or loitering. Next slide, please. Let's talk political attire. So what is prohibited is any sort of badge, insignia, emblem, any sort of communicative device relating to a candidate, measure, or political party on the ballot or to the conduct of the election inside the 100-foot distance marker. According to the Elections Division, very recently in public, the SOS interpretation is that apparel that doesn't advocate for a candidate, measure, or political party on the ballot does not violate the Texas statute. So we're going to go over some scenarios here in a bit of what you might encounter. So some of you may have heard, for those of you who are election law nerds, you may have heard of the Minnesota Voters versus Mansky case, which is a case out of Minnesota regarding political attire. In that case, the Supreme Court actually cited the Texas statute as an example of a statute that was better worded as far as what is and is not specifically prohibited. So our statute is only about things that are on the ballot in this election. Next slide, please. All right, communicative devices. So that is any mechanical or electronic device capable of recording images or sound. Not allowed within 100 feet of the voting stations. And I want to point out that this is a different 100 feet from the limitation on electioneering. This is not 100 feet from the entrance to the polling place. This is 100 feet of the voting stations, which, depending on how your polling place is set up, could be very different. If you have the voting stations inside a room, inside a much larger building, then you're talking about two very different sets of 100 feet. So that's cell phones, cameras, tablets, laptops, old school sound recorders, security cameras. Security cameras, that includes any of the building's security cameras. The building that you're using may have security cameras as a regular practice, where they, on a regular basis, just record people coming in and out. They must turn those security cameras away from the area where voting is occurring. It is not permissible for those security cameras to record people voting. Unlawful operation of a sound amplification device or sound truck. So this is within 1,000 feet of the building where the polling place is located. People can't be operating sound trucks, loudspeakers, that sort of thing for electioneering kinds of purposes. So no making political speeches, no electioneering for or against candidates, measures, political parties, the usual. I did see a question earlier about whether the election judge can use a bullhorn to talk to voters who are in line, and that's fine. In fact, the election judge has some discretion on this communicative devices issue. If the election judge needs to use a bullhorn to properly administer the election, then that's perfectly fine. That's not electioneering, that's administering the election. If the election judge needs to use a cell phone to administer the election, that's fine. If the election judge wants to allow the clerks to use their cell phones to administer the election, that's fine. There's some discretion built in here on the presiding judge's part of when to allow workers and of course themselves to do those sorts of things, because they're trying to hold the election. That's very different from other people trying to communicate elected or electioneering types of information. I also saw a question about use of walkie-talkies. A walkie-talkie is not a device capable of recording images or sounds. So I don't see that would be a problem. If you need to use walkie-talkies, if you're in a very large building used as a polling location and you need to communicate with your workers, I don't see that to be a problem. Okay, next slide, please. So distributing food and beverages outside the distance marker, obviously fine. There's a whole campaign finance issue potentially involved there, but whether or not it's permissible to do it generally, absolutely yes. Inside the 100-foot distance marker, my opinion, and other people may differ on their interpretation, my interpretation is that's a maybe. As long as the person who's, let's say, handing out water to folks standing in a long line, if they're not wearing any political attire, they're not doing any electioneering, they're literally just going into the space within 100 feet and handing people water, and then promptly after engaging that activity, leaving the space within 100 feet of the polling location so that they're not loitering, i.e. standing around doing nothing with no purpose, then that doesn't fit the definition of electioneering or loitering, and therefore there's no reason that under that statute that would not be permissible. Next slide, please. All right, so let's talk voter intimidation. So there's some examples on the screen. We're not going to get into the details of all of these because we could be here all day. So that's things like pressuring voters on voter ID, invading people's personal space, challenging their eligibility, unexplained law enforcement presence, videotaping voters, blasting speakers and bullhorns, physically blocking polling places, using threatening language in or near the polling place, yelling at people, calling them names while they're in line to vote, disrupting or interrogating voters, questioning voters about their political choices, citizenship status, or criminal record, displaying false or misleading signage, spreading false information. Those are examples. I would say that is definitely not limited to those examples. There are certainly other things that might meet the definition of voter intimidation. Next slide, please. So let's say voter intimidation is occurring at a polling place. What do you do about that? So when the intimidation occurs outside the polling place, the activity should first of all be reported to the presiding judge. So for those of you who are not presiding judges, report the activity to your presiding judge so that your presiding judge can take the appropriate action for the specific situation. Presiding judges should first and foremost try to de-escalate if possible. And again, we're going to talk through some scenarios. Try to respectfully inform the perpetrators that what they're doing is wrong. Ask them to stop. Provide warnings. Try to calm the situation down so that it doesn't get worse. It also may be necessary to report the activity to the county election authority. Let's back up. First of all, to report the activity to the vote pro folks. Sorry, ragweed. County election authority, district or county attorney, even, and possibly, if the situation requires it, to law enforcement. If it's something serious, particularly if people's physical well-being is being threatened, you may need to do that. That should be a last option, used sparingly, because the presence of law enforcement itself can be intimidating to some voters. Next slide, please. So there are several federal laws that prohibit voter intimidation in various forms. However, those laws would require some sort of criminal action to be taken by people like the FBI or DOJ, or for lawsuits to be filed. And you're the presiding judge, you don't have time to be filing lawsuits on election day. That's not the way that you're going to solve that problem. So Texas peace officers have some limited authority to make arrests for violations of federal law. So they're probably not going to be able to use that as the reason to arrest a violator, especially if the crime's not a felony. But there are some Texas statutes that might be useful in these situations. So we're going to talk about that next. Next slide, please. So while Texas doesn't have a statute specifically against voter intimidation, there are some Texas statutes that might be applicable. So one is coercion of a public servant or a voter. So this is where a person attempts to influence a voter not to vote or to vote for a particular manner by means of coercion, which means some sort of threat of some kind. Next slide, please. Disorderly conduct. So this includes abusive, indecent, profane, vulgar language, offensive gestures or language, anything that tends to incite breaches of the peace, threatening people in an obviously offensive manner, making unreasonable noise, fighting, obviously, or as Liz was talking about, displays a firearm or a deadly weapon in a public place in a manner calculated to alarm. So during the protests over the summer, sometimes you would see folks showing up to counter protest or whatever with openly carrying firearms. And in those situations, a lot of time that was in Texas, perfectly legal. If those people show up and do the same thing at a polling location, that may be a very different situation because of the place they are engaging in the activity. A polling location is a whole other ballgame on election day. If they are displaying those weapons in a manner that's calculated to alarm at a polling place, that could potentially fall into the category of disorderly conduct. Next slide, please. So riot, the actual definition, according to the statute of a riot, is assemblage of 7 or more persons, resulting in conduct which creates an immediate danger of damage to property or injury to persons, or if they substantially obstruct law enforcement or other governmental functions or services. And you, as a presiding judge, are providing a governmental function or service on election day at the polling place. Or if they disturb any person of a legal right or disturbs any person in the enjoyment of a legal right. Obstructing highways or other passageways. So you might see instances where folks show up and are blocking an entrance to a polling place. That would fall under the state statute. They are blocking a entrance or exit to a place where the public or a substantial group of the public has access, or a place used for the passage of other persons. That would fall under the statute if folks are physically blocking the entrance to the polls. Next slide, please. All right, so let's discuss some scenarios that you might encounter, and hopefully by walking through these with some of our folks who've served as election judges and clerks in the past, we can maybe get into a little more of them, the actual things that happen, and perhaps get some of your questions answered. So, all right, let's see. So we've got my lovely panelists here, Liz Hanks, Tamika Harris, and Catherine Franco, who've been workers in the past. So they've been where you're gonna be. All right, ladies. So make sure you're unmuted so you can answer my questions. So we're gonna go over 3 different stories, basically. And in those stories, some things are gonna happen that the presiding judge is gonna need to deal with. So in all of these stories, you are the presiding judge. So story number 1, Mike and Betty. So Mike and his wife Betty walk into the polling place without masks. Mike is wearing a Black Lives Matter cap and Betty is wearing a Biden 2020 t-shirt. The clerk that you have stationed at the entrance to greet voters offers them both a mask and tells them both that they need to remove or cover up the cap and the t-shirt. Betty takes a mask and puts on a sweater over her shirt. Mike, however, loudly proclaims that you are violating his First Amendment rights and he has the freedom to wear or not wear whatever he wants. You hear the kerfuffle and you walk over. How do you handle Mike as the presiding judge? Who wants to take it first? Tamika, I know you've been a presiding judge. How would you handle that?
Okay, so yes, 10 years being a presiding judge. With what I would say to all of you, whether you're an alternate judge or presiding judge, is that this is where your judgment is going to come into play, because you're literally going to have to size the situation up and you're going to have to size the person up. And you want to be objective, meaning not bringing your personal views into the situation. And where your line is going to be is, what does the law say? Mike cannot do what he's trying to do. Okay. And he's just not going to listen to, in our scenario, he's not going to listen to a word that you say because he's not having it. So what you do, you're not going to be able to calm him down. You're not going to be able to get him to listen to reason. So I'll give you a trick that has never failed me in the 10 years that I've been a presiding judge. So I either take the phone that I have and I dial the number to the Secretary of State, and then I pass the phone to Mike. Mike doesn't reach for the phone or doesn't anything. Meanwhile, then I dial the number, and the phone is ringing. Mike still doesn't take the phone. Then somebody answers and I say, I am presiding judge at precinct such and such, on what day it is, and I'm calling to make a complaint about myself. I have a voter here who has campaign wearing that, and he doesn't want to take it off, and he's insisting that he be allowed to vote. And I have Mr. Mike here right next to me, and I have offered the phone to him so that he can make the complaint himself. At that point, okay, then Mike is like, okay, I guess I will go ahead, and remove my t-shirt and then enter in and go ahead and vote.
Yeah, hey.
I've never once had anybody actually at that point continue to be obstructive or anything of that nature. They just go ahead and do what you've asked them to do.
Hey, Tamika and Sandra, can you just reiterate the scenario one quick time, Sandra? Because people are thinking that the Black Lives Matter hat was the problem, but it was really the t-shirt. And what did the t-shirt say?
The t-shirt is the Biden 2020 t-shirt. The hat is the Black Lives Matter hat. The Black Lives Matter hat can be worn into the polling location. The t-shirt cannot. So it's the t-shirt that he needs to either take off or turn around or put tape over it or something of that nature. So after I would say what you do is, you know, in my opinion, it's not going to work, but you can try to de-escalate and explain what the law is. And then when he doesn't do that, that's why I gave you that trick that I've always used, and it's never failed me. And at that point, it's like, okay, wait a minute, you're absolutely dead serious. You're absolutely dead serious about applying the law, and this is what I need to do in order to vote.
And
That's great.
I think I got folks a little crosswise that it was Mike wearing the BLM cap and Betty wearing the real issue with Mike is that he is causing a kerfuffle about the wearing of a mask. He doesn't want to wear a mask, and you can't make him wear a mask. How are you gonna deal with that situation?
Yeah, we've discussed this a number of times, and this is one of those areas where you just need to feel empowered as the presiding judge at the location. You have a couple options. You could offer them curbside voting if there is like a long line and you feel like people would be really uncomfortable if this voter comes in without a mask. But at the end of the day, they are allowed to come in without a mask. So how are you going to handle it? Tamika has given us some great advice about pulling people off to the side. Maybe she'll share that with us to have sort of a private conversation.
Yes, I would say what you do is you take the person aside and you explain we are in the middle of a pandemic. If it will help you, you can give a little bit of science. Look, just by speaking is 14,000 droplets of less than a micron in size. To give that some perspective, that's when you go to the doctor and you get your blood drawn, that tip of the needle is 1,000 times smaller than that. So you're not going to see it, hear it, or feel it. And I would assume that your polling location is going to be full. You're going to have a line. You're going to have each of the slates occupied. That is going to create a disruption with those people who are wearing a mask, who are concerned for their safety. And that, you know, offer him a mask and say, you can wear the mask, and as soon as you're done voting, you can take it off. If he still refuses at that point, say, well, you can wait outside and we'll offer you curbside voting. We will bring the ballot to you. And if he still says, no, I don't want to do that, so well, you will then have to wait over to the side while we clear the room. We'll bring you in, and then you can vote at the designated E-slate while no one else is there. Or he could just wear the mask and vote.
I just wanted to bring up really quick, Tamika brings up a good point about taking him to the side to speak to him. And in any case where you have someone who's causing a kerfuffle, that's a good idea for a couple of reasons. Not only does it de-escalate, but it keeps the line moving, because you don't want to cause, this ballot is going to be long, and it looks like we will not have straight ticket voting. So if you have people at the polls that are people trying to vote who are just looking up and watching this kerfuffle, it's going to take even longer. You're going to have that line really back up. So just another thought.
Excellent, excellent, good point. So, all right, so let's presume that we get everything straightened out with Mike. People have covered up, taken off, put on, whatever. So you get all that straightened out. Mike and Betty get checked in, they head to the voting machines next to each other. Shortly after, Betty exclaims, "This is all in Spanish." Mike goes over to her machine, pushes her aside, and starts pushing buttons on the machine, telling her, "You obviously messed this up and chose the wrong language. I know who we're voting for anyway. I'll just go through and push all of them for you. You see what's going on and walk over to intervene. How do you handle this situation?" Who wants to step in first? Tamika, have you had this before?
You walk over to Betty and you ask Betty if she requested Mike to assist her. If she says, and then you let Betty know that if you did, then you'll have to go back to the qualifying table and you'll have to finish your paperwork before you can do that. And if Betty is unresponsive or says no, then you let Mike know that the law says that you may not assist a voter unless it's at the voter's request. So therefore you will have to leave, because we're assuming that Mike has completed voting. Mike will probably, get upset with you, or whatnot, and said, no, this is what I'm needing to do. Again, move him off to the side by asking him, let's talk over here, or you can just start walking away 2 steps at a time. He's going to follow you because he wants you to hear what he's saying. And at that point, Betty can continue to vote. And again, it's always going to be a judgment call with whom you're dealing. You can offer him the ability that if he feels that that's not correct, he can call the county clerk's office, or he can call the Secretary of State, and see if he's allowed to cast the ballot for his wife, and whatnot. And hopefully that will get you to the point where Betty's allowed to vote while he's not standing over her shoulder and operating the machine. If it comes down, he's like, I'm not budging, I'm not moving, I'm not doing this, then you will have to take your sort of last measures. And it's like, look, and you have two options. You either leave or you're going to be made to leave, and we don't want to see that happen. So if you just go wait outside, let her finish the vote, and then you two can have a conversation later.
I would let me supplement that with a couple things, because I think there are some important things that I don't want to get lost here. One is when you see, and it often happens with partners or spouses or something like that, where someone comes over, and I think I've also had that happen, but in one situation I had, I came over to ask if the woman asked the man for help, and she said yes. She was just she had a hard time reading and was embarrassed to admit it, and that's why she didn't. She asked her husband to help her. And I think that especially in this cycle, we're really ramped up, and there's a lot of our nerves are tested, and I think that it can go a long way to assume people have the best intentions first, and sometimes they don't, like in Tamika's case. The other thing I was going to mention there was when you see someone and they say, oh, this ballot's in Spanish, a lot of times voters just start pressing buttons, and be sure to tell them, do not press the red button. If you press the red button, there's nothing we can do. Have them back off, go help them. You can cancel the booth and start over. But once they press the red button, it's over.
This is also a great scenario to tell you what one presiding judge I worked with did. Just as a matter of course, as people were coming into her polling place, she would make sure the clerks would separate. Wife or one spouse goes to this side to get checked in, the other spouse goes to this side to get checked in, and then they're sent to booths that are far apart from one another. So that way they're not even tempted to be talking while they're voting. You can kind of cut that issue, nip it in the bud before it even starts, if you can make sure and sort of get them into separate lines. And the presiding judge had told us as clerks ahead of time, if you see a couple come in together, this is how I want you to handle it. And at one point, a couple did come in, and a gentleman was very forcefully trying to help his wife. And she was saying very loudly, I don't want your help. I don't need your help. So the presiding judge came over and basically just explained the law to the husband and said, you cannot do that. She is saying that she doesn't want your help. So sometimes explaining the law to someone is the best tactic. And he did. He was angry, but he walked back to his own spot. And she was able to vote.
Those are some excellent tips. So let's say that you get Mike to calm down. How do you actually fix the fact that Betty's ballot is in Spanish and she doesn't speak Spanish, but somehow she's managed to hit the button to choose the wrong language here?
So what you will do, and it should be covered in the county clerk's training, you'll go back to the judge booth controller and you will cancel that ballot, issue a new access code for her so that she can select the proper language for her.
Excellent. All right, so let's move on to the next voter. We have Kim. Kim is a 32-year-old new citizen who's very excited to vote for the first time. Kim's native language is Korean, and she's not quite as comfortable speaking English. So she's brought her 15-year-old daughter with her to the polls to translate for her. When she gets to the check-in table, the clerk asks to see her ID. Kim shows her U.S. citizenship certificate that has her photo on it. The clerk looks her up in the poll book, but can't find her name. Kim's daughter tries explaining that Korean names are often listed the opposite from English names, with the family name first, and asks if the judge tried looking up Kim's registration that way. The clerk tells Kim and her daughter that the name on the ID must exactly match the registration list. And furthermore, children aren't allowed in the polls, so Kim's daughter is going to have to wait outside. Both voices are being raised as Kim and her daughter try to argue with the clerk. You hear the argument and you walk over to see what's going on. What do you do in this situation?
One,
Maybe you want to start us out?
I'll take the first part and then say one for the presiding judge. When you come in at 6 o'clock in the morning and your election clerks are there, you need to set the tone for how the election is going to proceed and explain to the clerks and your alternate judge what you expect and what to do. In other words, when to escalate an issue to you as the presiding judge. In this particular situation, if the alternate judge sees this, then the alternate judge should go directly to the presiding judge and explain the what's happening, with respect to this. And then I'll leave it to Liz or Catherine to discuss the children in the polls issue.
Well, that's just not true. Or otherwise, I've been voting illegally for the last 7 years. So yeah, that should just be something you go over that clerk's head, and the presiding judge should be able to say what the law really is. But I mean, you need to keep your kids under control, and maybe as a judge, you could ask a voter to, I don't know, quiet the kids or bring them a sticker if you want to be helpful. But they're allowed to be there.
And don't let them push the big red button.
Right, importantly.
Kat, anything to add on that?
No, I think that's just about right. I was telling these ladies yesterday that I always give, when I see kids come in with their parents, I always give them the stickers first so they have something to mess with while their parents are voting, and so the kids don't press the big red button, which again, we do not want the big red button to be pushed unless someone is ready for their ballot to be counted.
Right.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. Most parents are going to come in with all kinds of tactics to keep their kids busy for the 10 to 15 minutes it's going to take them to vote anyway. But yeah, stickers help. A piece of paper and a pencil goes a long way. Just, give people grace because they're just trying to vote, and people with families are trying to vote too.
So what do you do about the fact that the clerk can't seem to find Kim's name on the list?
Oh,
I believe, yeah, this was discussed earlier. Kat, was it you who was discussing calling the registration office?
Right. Right. So if you can't find them on the list, and you'll get training about this, extensive training when you train with the clerk's office, but try sometimes you can try using birthday or change a slight typo or something like that. If you really can't find it, we always say call the county clerk's office. I also like I said earlier, I like to call the voter registrar's office is sometimes less busy than the clerk's office, and they can help you with issues with finding names on voter rolls really easily, since that's what their position is, and they will have a hotline as well on election day that you can call, and that's very helpful.
And so you will, in that situation, you can call the clerk's office, the voter registrar, if you find that, and the voter registrar says, yes, the voter is registered, but they're not on the list, then you still enter them in and they vote a regular ballot, not a provisional ballot. It's just that for whatever reason, it didn't make it to the Harris County voter list. And you want to also make sure that you ask the voter how they registered. If they registered with DPS, then that will give you a clue as to where to look for their registration. It may not have just made it to the county yet, but they did register in time and should have been on the voter rolls.
People are asking for the voter registrar phone number and the county clerk's phone number. I assume that's information we'll include when we send out these slides.
It will. I'm pulling it up right now as well, so I'll put it in the chat for everyone.
And for the presiding judges, they should be in your packet on a brightly colored form what the numbers are, because they should have, during an early vote and on election day, you should have dedicated numbers for the presiding judge to collect.
Right. Yeah, this training that we're giving is just like the cherry on top. It's just unfortunate that you haven't received the really extensive training yet from the county clerk's office, but it's coming. So don't feel like if your question didn't get answered here that it's not going to be covered before you show up to the polls. It will be for sure. And I saw a question in the chat about, can the judges or clerks provide toys or like a fidget spinner or something to kids? And I would just think in the current environment with the COVID-19 issue that providing materials to kids is probably not a good idea unless you're prepared to like wipe them down really carefully between kids. I don't know. I would be hesitant to do that.
So let's say that after trying some different name variations and contacting the registrar's office, Kim still can't be found on the list. So what might be some reasons that she might not be on the list? What should she do at this point?
If you can't find her on the list at all, and you've checked with the voter registrar, you check with the county clerk's offices, and you know that no registration has come in, you may want to consider it's possible that she could be registered in another county. So she could be registered in Montgomery County, Fort Bend, or Brazoria, or, you know, Bexar County, somewhere else. So you might want to find out, you know, where, you know, if that is the case. So you can at least let the voter know, because the voter is getting frustrated. I'm here to vote. Why can't you find me? Oh my goodness, what has happened? So, you know, so does that mean I can't vote today? If after, you know, she's not registered in any county in Texas, then what you can do is she can vote a provisional ballot, which will get her registered. And when you explain this to the voter, you want to explain what the law is. If she's not registered at all, she's just not eligible to vote. So it's not going to count. However, a provisional ballot doesn't mean always that your vote isn't going to count. It's going to count if you meet the requirements. So you should not tell voters that, oh, well, you can vote provisional, but it's not going to count anyway. Right. The only time that you should say that is where you are absolutely 100% sure that she's not registered, you know, that she is not registered to vote. But voting that provisional ballot will affect a registration for her for the next election, if that is the case.
Absolutely. Yeah, the cross-county issue happens a lot in cities that cross county boundaries. Like say someone lives in Missouri City, which is at Harris and Fort Bend. Sometimes people don't know which side of the county line they live on because they don't pay attention to county lines in their daily course of living. So it just may be that they need to go to the other county. There is a limited ballot procedure available in certain circumstances. And if they really are just not registered, then at the very least, a provisional ballot will get them registered. But just to echo what Tanika said, don't tell people, well, you can vote provisionally, but it won't count. Never, ever say that. The only time that was ever true was with polling place or precinct specific polling places was a situation where that might be true. Harris County has countywide vote centers. If you are found to be properly registered somewhere in Harris County, your provisional ballot will count. So don't ever tell people your provisional ballot's not going to count.
I see a lot of questions about the names being reversed. And yeah, so one of the things that you'll learn is in training is sometimes you have to look up names to see if they're slightly off, because a lot of times what it comes down to is a data entry error. But in a situation like this where the names are reversed, they've told you the name might be reversed, you find it reversed, then yes, I think that you have identified, but birthday, everything else matches, then you've identified the voter. What will happen is you will ask the voter to sign an affidavit in order to change the name so that it's listed correctly the next time around.
All right, so let's say we do manage to confirm Kim's registration. Oh, we almost forgot. The one thing we didn't bring up is DPS. All the time, people who get their driver's license renewed at DPS and register to vote while they're doing that, it doesn't get promptly processed, and there are delays with registrations that happen at DPS getting into the registration files at the county voter registrar's office. So if someone says they registered at DPS, that's a big red flag that this person probably really is registered to vote. They're just not appearing on the rolls for that reason. So contact the registrar, double check, provisional ballot. DPS and the county registrar's offices usually do a reconciliation on the back end after the election to make sure that this stuff has been properly processed, so that those provisionals can be counted if the person really did register at DPS.
Yes, and you'll be instructed in those situations when it's a DP and they say DPS to mark on the envelope DPS, and then it's held aside and it's dealt with during the ballot check for provisionals and with ballot board, and they do that double check with the DPS. So that's really important.
Right, and that's for people who registered in person at DPS. Not that a whole lot of people are doing that these days, but as a general rule, that's for people who register in person at DPS. Some of you may have heard about the lawsuit about people registering online when they renew at DPS. A whole other can of worms. We're not getting into that today. But yeah. So, all right, let's assume we do find Kim's registration. It's confirmed. She's registered to vote in Harris County. Clerk completes check-in process. Kim gets her access code, goes to a machine with her daughter. The daughter begins translating the instructions on the screen into Korean. A poll watcher who's been appointed to observe at the location tells you that she objects to Kim's daughter being able to translate for her because her daughter is not a registered voter and Kim has to use an interpreter appointed by the county. What is your ruling on this objection by the poll watcher?
I think this one's pretty easy. You know, it goes back to what I said earlier about just explaining the law to someone who doesn't quite have their facts straight. So of course she would be allowed to ask her daughter, as long as she's the one giving permission and requesting it, the assistance. So I guess I would take Tamika's strategy, pull this woman aside, explain the law to her, make sure she's okay with it, and then go on about my business.
Yeah, I think there's often some confusion about interpreters versus people who are assisting by providing translation. You've got this group of people who are official interpreters being employed by the county for the covered languages in Harris County, which are Spanish, Vietnamese, and Mandarin. And then you've got people who are just assistants of the voter's choice, who the thing they happen to be assisting with is translating the balloting materials, etc., for the voter. And I think sometimes people get confused and think that the requirements for someone who's an official paid employee interpreter also apply to anyone providing translation, and that's not accurate.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Anyone else want to chime in on that one? All right, so moving on. The poll watcher grudgingly accepts her ruling, but insists that she has the right to observe assistance being provided by Kim's daughter. What do you tell her about that? Other than no.
I'm going to let Kat or Tamika weigh in on this one.
The poll watcher can observe. They cannot talk to the voter. They can't ask the voter any questions. It had always been my policy that the poll watcher direct any questions or issues that they had to the presiding judge only. So I did not permit the poll watchers to have conversations with the clerks. In this situation where the voter, it is the voter's assistance, the poll watcher does not have the right to observe. If it were a county clerk interpreter, then yes, and they have to do so given the pandemic and the normal distance rules with respect to that, because the reality of the situation is, I mean, you don't know what the interpreter is saying, but if it's a county interpreter or if it's one of the election clerks, one of your bilingual election clerks, then yes. But if it's the daughter, that's who mom brought with her, that's who mom says, I want to do this, then no, you may not interfere with the voter's right to choose their own assistants, their own interpreter, and to vote in a non-intimidating environment.
So what if that strategy doesn't work and the poll watcher insists that she has the right to observe Kim's daughter assisting her, even after you explain the law to her? You tell her to step away from Kim's voting machine, but she refuses to do so. What are you going to do with this poll watcher?
See ya.
Yes.
All right. Well, that was an easy one. Okay. So let's talk about issues between staff. So you, the presiding judge, you meet your team of workers at the polls. There's a Republican alternate judge that you've never worked with before, but who seems friendly, plus some clerks of both parties that you've hired from the lists provided by the parties, plus two people who claim they're clerks, but you've never heard of them. The alternate judge tells you he recruited them. First off, how do you handle these two alleged clerks?
I mean, the law is, as we walked through, and you'll learn more, the presiding judge gets to choose their election clerk. So if these are two people that you don't know and you did not hire, they don't have a right to be there. How people handle it is going to be, I'm sure, based on your what you're like as a presiding judge. For me, I would pull them to the side and explain that there must have been a mix-up. I would try to understand the facts, why they're there, and if they're, there with good intentions and they just want to volunteer, then maybe try to help them find another location that isn't full, that needs some help. I would just try to solve it in a cordial manner. But if they refuse, then they have no right to be there.
Right. I mean, under the election code, section 32.031 says the presiding judge shall appoint the clerk. So there's a presiding judge, that's a shall, not an if, unless someone else wants to do it. That is the responsibility and sole responsibility of the presiding judge. It's no one else's responsibility. The only person that the presiding judge does not hire is the alternate judge, which is appointed by the respective party. So if you have, and I've had this happen on quite a number of occasions where that has occurred. It's 5:45 in the morning. There's these people here, you haven't hired them and you don't know why they're here. And they say, oh, well, so-and-so told me that I was hired. And I would just explain the situation to them, and that we had our staff and that we're prepared to go forward and that they may not remain in the polling location.
All right then. So we've got that issue resolved. Everyone other than the AJ is new, and this is their first time working elections. You all get the polling place set up, you're ready to go. You open the doors promptly at 7 a.m. to an eager crowd of voters. The voters proceed to the check-in table where one of them says to the clerk, I am so excited to vote for Joe Biden, but I don't really know who the other people are running for stuff. Can y'all help me with that? And the clerk says, of course, we're happy to show you how to vote for all the Democrats. You hear this and your eyes widen as you rush over to the check-in table. What do you say to the clerk and what do you say to the voter?
I just want to say, as a general matter, you should talk to your clerks ahead of time and make sure they understand the rules, and that they won't be tempted to say anything political as they're working. But if you're in this scenario, you just have to nip it in the bud. I don't know how forceful you need to be about it, just sort of friendly. We can't be discussing politics here. No, of course you cannot help.
Yeah, so I always start my day before we open doors to the public with one of my rules as a presiding judge is we don't talk politics here, even if there are no voters in the voting location. And then if some things like that come up, it's easy to remind people, look, we talked about this, we don't talk politics. Regarding this specific situation, I think you've just got to come and separate the two and talk to the clerk after the fact. And remember, we want to help people vote, but we cannot be partisan about that. We've got to be as neutral as possible. And I think as lawyers, that's one thing that we can, we know how to work our language in a way that is more fair and neutral, and help people vote.
I think what you do is just remind the voter and the clerk that the purpose here today is to make sure that everyone who is eligible to vote is given an opportunity to do exactly just that, and that the staff doesn't care who you vote for. Our only purpose is to make sure that you are given that opportunity to vote for the candidates of your choice, but we cannot select those candidates for you. And you can,
piggybacking on that, what happens if the voter wants to know who the candidates are and what issues they stand for?
Again, that's something that you can't discuss with them. Now, what I always used to, especially when you have long ballots, I would designate a particular clerk, to go out along the lines and say, well, while you're standing in line, if you have any, here are the sample ballots, they're posted on the wall, take a look. If there's anybody you don't know or you're not sure, now is the time, to look them up. And, you can go outside back to your car, whatever you need to do, and find out, decide who it is that you want to vote for before you get, into the voting booth. And that cuts down on a good 65% of that, which will also help move your line along.
Gotcha. All right. So let's say that instead of an alternate judge or a clerk being the one who's doing something they shouldn't be, let's flip the script and say you're an alternate judge and the presiding judge is doing things that they're not supposed to be. How should the alternate judges handle that situation?
I think the easiest way to handle that, you want to be, so it's you're having to work with this person all day. And so you don't want to start a fight early on, but I think you can very discreetly go outside, contact us, document it, let us know what's happening, and we can start working on the back end. I think that's a really good way to handle it. Another thing that I've done is if the PJ is doing something that is just flat out wrong, is I just use the fact that I'm a lawyer to my advantage, and I say, well, actually, what the law says is this. And sometimes that's enough to kind of, get them back in line.
I mean, you definitely, as the alternate judge, need to talk to the presiding judge about the conduct that you believe is wrong. And your strongest support is the law. The code says this is what's permitted and what you're doing is not permitted. Now, are you going to stop that behavior because, and whatnot? If it continues to escalate, and it kind of reminds me of a situation that I was an alternate judge where there was a presiding judge who, there was some proposition that was on the ballot. So she parked her car up in the front, right at the entrance with the vote for proposition, whatever it was, on it. And she was having the vote for this proposition and all of this. And I said, you need to move your car, you need to take your pins and all of that out because, it's prohibited. And she was just absolutely, I'm not going to do it or anything of that nature. So I called in a complaint. And you said, because you can imagine we've got voters out and, who knows how they're voting either for or against the propositions. Well, the end of that was that, sometimes, but try every measure you can before you get there and say, this is exactly what's going on. She's not moving the car. She's not taking off the paraphernalia. She's not doing, any of that nature, anything of that nature. And you can't even discuss it with it. So what happened is she was removed. After the complaint was made. And then I was then the presiding judge, and we just continued the election for the rest of the day.
Yeah, don't get yourself fired by starting a fight with your presiding judge right off the bat. If all goes well, you may end up the presiding judge if the presiding judge isn't following the law. All right.
But as the alternate judge, you can't be fired by the presiding judge. You were selected by either of the parties to be there on that list, so you're there. The only reason that either the presiding judge or the alternate judge can be removed is if you're violating the election code.
So let's talk about everything is going smoothly. Everything's fine, but then you notice that the line is getting long. What are some things you might be able to do to help reduce wait times? Tips and tricks, best practices to keep things moving along.
So once you should know who your clerks are. For those of you who this is your first time, what you want to do is you want to put your fastest and best people at the qualifying table. Your judge booth controllers, you can put the less experienced people there because what you're really doing is just selecting the ballot and printing out access codes. All of the most important and difficult work is going to happen at the qualifying table, which is where most of the slowdown is going to occur.
Got it. Okay. That's an excellent trick. All right. So to wrap things up, what do you do as the presiding judge if you and your Republican counterparts strongly disagree about whether or not something is permissible?
Call us. Right?
Yeah, call us and we'll help you resolve it.
You're always welcome to call us if you hit a roadblock and you've tried everything else and you're still struggling. Just give us a call, and we are sitting in a room. Well, this election will be sitting in many separate rooms, but on a Zoom call together and trying to figure out these issues that are the more difficult, sticky issues, so that more people are able to vote. At the end of the day, we have to assume best intentions, that people are just there trying to vote. And we have to do our very best to make sure that anyone who meets the requirements is able to vote. So, you know, just try to work things out as amicably as possible, assume best intentions, and try to keep people moving through.
I believe Michael mentioned it, I'll mention it again, err on the side of the voter. At the end of the day, err on the side of the voter. All right, so I believe Nicole's got some questions in the chat.
Okay, so we're going to move to question and answer now. There have been a lot of questions in the chat, so we are going to get through as much as we can. However, for those of you who are going to be early vote judges who still have questions, next Friday, we are going to have a Q&A with me and the elections team. So you will have another opportunity to ask questions. For those of you who are working on election day, you have yet to have your county clerks training. You will have many of these questions answered at the county clerks training, okay? So I noted a few questions that came through. I think we have 12 minutes left, so we'll try to do a little bit of this, but you will have more opportunities to ask questions. So don't worry if we don't get to your question. Okay, so one question I saw that I think would be, it would be great if Tamika, Catherine, and Liz in particular could answer this. Somebody wrote, as an election judge or clerk multiple times, I witnessed a judge explaining procedures to people of color in a way or tone that is discouraging to voters of color. How would you handle that?
You need to talk to them about it immediately. But before you even do that, while it's happening, if you're observing it, then at that point you need to intervene, and you can do so in the appropriate manner by, you know, stepping to and saying, but, you know, here's what the law is and your ballot will count. You want to calm the voter down and explain to him, no matter what, if you are registered to vote, you know, your provisional ballot is going to count, and I'm here to make sure that that happens. So I'm not going to let your vote not, you know, I'm not going to allow you not to be able to vote today. If there's any other way that we can get you to be able to vote a regular ballot, then that's fine, because sometimes you do not need to vote a provisional ballot. You know, if we know that you're registered in Fort Bend County, drive over to Fort Bend County. Right. And vote. If, you know, it's a matter of your DPS just hasn't come through yet, then that, and explain them that you're gonna, you know, you'll get, here's, you know, when you give them the receipt, because you get a receipt, you know, from your provisional ballot. If it's an issue that you need to cure, just give the voter as much information as possible. And then once you've dealt with that situation, then talk to the presiding judge about it and say, hey, I've noticed that you are only telling people of color that your vote won't count, because that's a surefire way to get, you know, the voters' hackles up immediately if you say that. But definitely step in and intervene, de-escalate, and help the voter.
Yeah, you might even try to be the one who gets to a voter first. If you are seeing this be an issue for this presiding judge or clerk or whomever it is that's treating people differently. You just kind of jump in and answer the question yourself so that you can avoid that situation altogether.
Okay.
Don't we have in the presentation, didn't we discuss the authority under which a poll watcher can be expelled from a polling place? So people are asking about it in the chat, and I'm thinking that if we send out the slides, it'll be there.
There's citations in the slides. I think the idea is to we could send the slides to judges and AJs who are Democrats who we've nominated. And there are citations there, but the election code is not difficult for lawyers and law students. You can look it up easily. It is not a difficult or complicated statute.
Also the election judge's handbook, and I put a link in to the SOS election judge's handbook in the chat. Everybody read it, learn it, live it, love it. Take it with you if you're going to be working at the polls, and if your presiding judge is doing something that is not proper procedure, point them to the page of the election judge's handbook where it says what the proper procedure is. That often nips things in the bud right there. If an official document from the government, from the authority in charge of elections, says they should be doing what you say they should be doing. Game, set, match.
Okay, let's go to this question. And it says, because I know that this is on a lot of people's minds. It says, they're asking us to give instruction on handling official poll watcher groups that refuse to abide by the rules. And then this question in particular says there have been at least 2 in Harris County in recent years, and there could be a handful for any election official. Sometimes persons from the same group become election judges or clerks in an attempt to empower the poll watcher to do things they have no authority to do. Okay, so we went over the restriction on poll watcher. As I said earlier, in Texas, poll watchers do not have a lot of authority. It is different in other states, but here, really all a poll watcher can do is observe and bring any issues that they see to the attention of the presiding judge. The presiding judge has power here. You have authority. If that poll watcher is doing something that they should not be doing, you can remove them. If they refuse to go, then that's a time to call us, call the county clerk. And if things escalate to a point where somebody's life is at stake, of course, call, you may need to call 911. But we would ask you to try, if you can, to first de-escalate the situation and know that we are here to support you and the county clerk's office is here to support you and to back you up in those situations. Does anyone else have anything to
No, but if you're the presiding judge, when the poll watcher arrives, you need to explain what the rules are at that point, and let them know that, and then assign them a place where they can observe from, and there will be tapes in your material. You can actually put the tape on the floor and say, you may not cross this line. And then if they are aware in the beginning of what the rules are, when they violate them, it's not going to come as a surprise. And let them know that if you do violate the rules, then I will remove you. It's not a time to play. It's here's what it is. You're free to observe. You have an issue, you bring it up to the presiding judge. If you're the alternate judge, you might want to suggest to the presiding judge that, you explain the rules. And then if they violate them, then say, here, because you as the alternate judge can say, yes, you can request the removal of the poll watcher for violating the rules. But, and if if you're still at a standoff, then call us and we'll assist you.
Yeah, a thing, I think it's probably already been said, but a thing for you presiding judges to remember is it's not just a title. You have the authority as basically a district judge for your polling location. And if you need to use that authority, it's there. So.
There have also been a number of questions about electioneering, and this comes up every single year, every single cycle. For example, one person asked, could you wear a mask that says your vote matters on it?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, that's not about a candidate or party on the ballot? Sure.
Not on the ballot, then it's okay.
There was also a question asking if you could wear something that says RBG.
Is RBG running for office in this election? If not,
Right.
she's not a party or a candidate on the ballot.
Yeah, we don't need to tie ourselves up in knots trying to figure out if something is or isn't political. The law is very clear. It's a candidate's name or something that's on the ballot.
I'd also add to that although it may be legal for you to wear something, there may not be any real benefit to it, right? So, the judges who are watching this may understand that wearing an RBG t-shirt is not electioneering, but you may encounter a judge who does not understand that. And is it really worth the fight, right? So be very intentional about this, decide where is there a benefit to wearing something and where is there not, right? Is this a fight that you need to have?
Yeah, I concur with that. So let's flip the script and say you're not the election clerk or judge, you're a voter. Just don't. Just don't. Just wear something plain and nondescript, and don't start a fight that you don't need to have. Just get in, get out so other people can vote.
And put on your shirt afterward and take your selfie outside the polling place and post it everywhere.
Okay, there's a number of questions that are kind of on smaller topics. Someone just asked, can you explain why it's important to call the Secretary of State and not just the county to look up a voter? You would not be calling the Secretary of State. You'd be calling your county, or in Harris County, that would be the tax assessor's office or the county clerk's office. Sorry, so I'm just scrolling through to see if there's some kind of bigger general questions that we could get in the last 4 minutes. There
While
have
you're looking just on SOS, y'all don't call SOS. Contact the county clerk, contact HCDP, let folks there be the liaison with SOS, because they get overwhelmed with all the people trying to call SOS to ask them questions. Use your party, use the county clerk's office as your liaison to get your questions answered, and they will relay the information.
I also see a lot of comments from presiding judges, which is great. There are a lot of people in our community with a lot of knowledge. I would ask you, seek out the newer judges. We have a lot of new judges this year. They could use your help. If you have great advice to give, reach out to your community, go through your Democratic clubs, find those new people and reach out to them, help them. We will be there to support, of course, but if there are, if you as a presiding judge have a relationship with a new judge, that's terrific. And we would very much encourage sort of mentoring relationships. Okay, I think we're at 11:58.
What about the question about media, Nicole? I think that's
okay.
important.
So, how close can TV cameras and reporters get?
Outside the 100-foot distance marker.
Sometimes, though, they have already spoken with the county clerk's office and made arrangements to be inside a polling location. They cannot be videotaping over somebody's shoulder as they are voting, right? But they may be allowed to have to record certain parts of the polling location. If you have media, call the county clerk or call us, right? So that we can find out exactly what's going on and whether that person is actually allowed to be there or not. They would need to have special permission. People cannot record within 100 feet otherwise. Okay, so I think with that, because we're right at 12, unless any of the other panelists saw something in the chat that I missed, I think we'll hand it back to Stephen. And just thank you everyone for coming. One thing I'll say really quick is that at the very beginning of the chat is a link. If you have not signed up to be an election worker and you want to, the link is there. If you have signed up and you have not heard from us yet, don't worry, we are still getting to it. We have 810 locations to staff and it takes a while, but we are moving as fast as we can and we will be with you as soon as we can.
Thanks, Nicole, and thanks, Sandra, Liz, Tamika, Michael, and Catherine. Great presentation. It shouldn't be so complicated to vote, but it is, and this is probably going to be the most challenging election for all of you election workers out there. So we will post the video from today. It ought to be up by early next week. If anybody wants to watch it or share it with others. And as Nicole said, there'll be some training offered. When was that, Nicole, the next training?
So the county clerk's office will be reaching out to everyone who is signed up to work with their training. There's multiple dates. They'll be sending you an email link. The sign up is on their website. So you go to their website, you sign up for training, and then they'll send you the Zoom link for that training. That's for election day. Early vote should be completed.
And are you still seeking more volunteers to work as election judges and election workers?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm sure everyone has seen that the county clerk's office has received something like 29,000 applications for workers, which is wonderful because it means that none of the locations are going to be closed due to lack of staffing. However, the way staffing works, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party on their side gets to staff first. So we get to nominate the judges and then the judges hire their clerks. In this year, because we have so many new judges, we are also trying to recruit clerks for those judges. So yes, at the Democratic Party, we need more people because I will staff you first. And then after our positions are staffed, then it goes to the county clerk's pool of 39,000 people.
Nicole, just to clarify, because I've heard a lot of misunderstandings. You're not staffing from the county clerk's list of 28,000, right? You don't have that list.
No, I have no access to that.
Right. So if you've gone through the county clerk and haven't heard, that's because you need to go through Nicole first.
Let me ask this. If you've already volunteered or applied to the county clerk, can you go to Nicole and Harris County Democrats?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. If you apply through the county clerk's website and you wanted to come through us instead, go to the link that I put in the chat. It does not matter if you are on both the county clerk's list and our list. All that might happen is that we'll staff you, and then perhaps, 2 weeks from now, you might get a call from the county clerk asking if you can work, and you can just say, I'm already staffed. That's it. So absolutely come to us, please.
And you'll be more likely to be placed if you go through the Harris County Democratic Party, correct?
Yes, you're much more likely because we don't have 30,000 spots to fill. Even if the county clerk's office was filling every single spot, less than half would get a position. On the other hand, the Democrats still have a number to fill. So if you come through us, you are much more likely to get staffed.
And that form can be found on the Harris County Democratic Party's website. I put it up earlier in the chat, but you'll see it if you click on elections right there on their website of the form.
Yeah. I put a link in this chat it's a little bit different. So don't worry, you can either go to HCDP's website or you can go to that link that I put in the chat. If it takes you to 2 different places, but all the information ends up with me. So go either way is fine.
Okay, so if you're a law student or know of law students out there, or lawyers, or people that are just good problem solvers and are interested in working in this election, please have them apply through the Harris County Democratic Party to be an election worker. It pays, I believe, what, $17 an hour, $20 an hour? Is that right, Nicole?
$17 an hour for the alternate judges and the clerks, and $20 an hour for the presiding judges.
And it's a commitment from what, 6 a.m. till the last voter votes, right?
Yes, and because we are managing so many polling locations, we are not looking for people who can do shifts. Let me say 2 things. First of all, early voting is filled. I have no more positions for early voting, neither does the county clerk to my knowledge. So that is no longer an option. This is all about election day. We are looking for people who can work from 6 a.m. until after the polls close. It's just too difficult to work out shifts because, of course, if you can only work the morning, then I have to find somebody who can work the afternoon, and we just don't have time for that. So I'm looking for people who can work 6 a.m. until after polls close on election day.
Okay, thank you all for all your hard work. Does anybody have anything to add before we close this out?
Oh, the most important thing, the question that just showed up, are we allowed to have coffee delivered? I have worked many polls where there is any kind of food and beverage available to the judges and the clerks, so that's not a problem.
Great. All right, anybody else? All right, thank you all for all your hard work. I know y'all put a lot into this and will be putting a lot into this as we are gearing up in the next 2 weeks. But spread the word, people, early vote, make it easier for all these election workers on election day. Please, please, please vote as soon as early voting starts, get out there and early vote and tell all your friends to early vote. Don't wait until election day, and certainly don't wait until late afternoon on election day. Thank you all, and we appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing y'all on October 8th if anyone wants to join our eviction crisis CLE. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.